Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of Melody Makers. Today I'm interviewing an amazing musician and composer, Blair Borland. He's a composer on games like Apex Legends, Watch Dogs Legions, and a few more. He's also done some soundtracks for independent movies. He also uploads a lot of music on his own YouTube channel. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, there's not much that I have to add, beyond what you said. But I'm Blair, and I love making music. I also did just write a bunch of music for a new game coming out called Multiversus, which is really cool. It's like a Warner Brothers thing, so I'm
Yeah,
really
I saw
excited to
that
have
on
done
your
that as
website.
well. Yeah, it's super cool, and I fulfilled a lifelong dream of mine where I got to write theme music for the Teen Titans, which is just like
That's
I'm
insane.
freaking out about it. I just love it so much.
I bet that's a lot of people's dreams.
Oh yeah, I mean the Teen Titans are so good. If it is anybody else's dream, first of all, I'm sorry for stealing it from you, and and second of all, yes, it's a good dream to have. I think it's so much fun.
I'm just gonna get right into the questions.
Right.
How did you get started with your career? Did you ever take any lessons, or are you mostly self-taught?
That's a good question. So I'm kind of a weird mix of self taught. Um, I care a lot about um always learning, and so that learning might uh, uh come into fruition through YouTube videos, or it may come through, I did a couple classes with a guy who teaches at USC. I did some lessons with a guy named Ira Hershin, who was Lalo Schifrin's orchestrator. In case you don't know or I guess Lalo Schifrin, he's the guy who wrote bump bump ba da dum dum da da,
Oh, wow.
the Mission Impossible theme, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean my whole life's thing has been I want to learn. I love composing because it is just this endless pit of knowledge that you can dive into, and I was really attracted to it because of that. And so yeah, I'm always constantly learning. I will hire people to be my teachers all the time. But I'll also just go off and spend 8 hours on YouTube, just like learning. So I think if this is the kind of thing you want to do for a living, then just committing to always learning, no matter if somebody else is teaching you, or if you're teaching yourself, or if you're just doing a ton of YouTube or whatever. You can definitely do it. But to, I guess, go back to your sort of first question, is how did I get my start? Um, well, I mean, there's a lot of different ways I can answer that question. I can say I started playing piano, and I got piano lessons when I was like 5 years old. And then piano progressed to guitar when I was about like 9 or 10. I told my mom I didn't ever want to play piano again. And
Wow.
and so instead of, I did guitar, which I loved, and I got very good at guitar at a very early age, to the point where um, I'm 32 years old now, and when I was 13, I was touring with bands who were my age now, and so and which it was really fun, and I had a great time. And so basically, 10 years or so passed. I didn't know what I wanted to do with music, but when I was in high school, I watched like one or two movies a day. And so, obviously, it should have been blatantly clear to me what I should do for a living. But while I loved composing, I just didn't think it was a realistic thing, for me. I didn't think that it was something that I would be able to actually get to do. And so, more or less, a bunch of time passed. I didn't know what to do with my life. I was honestly a little depressed. And around the time I was 25, my wife suggested that I should apply to Berkeley Valencia, which is, it's Berkeley College of Music's. It's their master's program, and they have it over in Spain. And so I
Mm,
decided to apply for that,
wow.
and I applied late for the late deadline. And I remember it was like April 15th I had applied or something, and their late deadline was April 5th. And there was like one or two spots left in the program, and I got one of them. and I was just like, I was overjoyed. I was so happy, and so yeah, that kind of brought about a big change in my life of what I thought I might do for a living. Um, and a very long story, very short, is that I while I was in my program at Berkeley, I ended up starting chatting with Stephen Barton, who's the head composer of Apex Legends and Jedi Fallen Order, and he just finished season 3 of Star Trek Picard. Yeah, so I ended up chatting with him, and I ended up getting a job, and excuse me, and basically I ended up my first job in Hollywood um, at like 27 years old, I think I was when I started, which is honestly actually later in
That's
life than
great.
a lot of people start trying to compose. Um, but my first job was writing for Apex Legends, which has like 80 million players or something like that. And so I really like it's a combination of, yeah, I had some hard work. I got help from friends and family, and I've worked really hard to try and just make the best sounding music that I know how to make. So yes, sorry, that's about an hour long question to or an answer to your question.
No, that's all right. Yeah, it was a
Thank
great
you.
answer. That's a crazy first job, by the way, to be able
It
to work
really
on
is.
a
I mean,
game like
most
that.
people are like their first job is making $14 an hour, working as an intern for, yeah,
That's
for
mine.
for like Hans Zimmer somewhere. You know what I mean? So it's like I really did luck out, and I think that you can't like take credit for every single thing you've ever done. I think I'm good at music, but I've also had some lucky breaks, and I'm really really thankful for those.
Well, going back to your previous response, I think it's really freeing to have a mindset
Yeah.
of always wanting to learn because not even with music, it can improve your
Yeah,
entire life
absolutely.
in general.
Oh, I completely agree with that.
Do you have any sort of tips for anyone who wants to, I guess, enhance their vision
Yeah.
and be able to get
Yeah,
better at
absolutely.
learning?
I think so I don't know if you're familiar with Jordan Peele or not, but he's the guy. First of all, he's one of the guys on Key and Peele, which if you haven't watched those skits, they're hilarious. And second, he wrote the films, Get Out, Us, and is
Oh,
it Gone? What is the last one that just came out? I can't remember now. Um, Nope. It's called Nope. There we go. Um, there we go. So he's a really phenomenal director, and his advice basically when asked the exact same
yeah.
question was follow the fun, right? So it's like follow what you feel passionate about. I think we composers are a weird bunch where we're kind of like we're the people who are a little bit too businessy to try and make it as pop stars, but a little bit too creative to make it as bankers. And I think that
Hmm.
like if you're gonna have a creative lifestyle like this, then I think one of the best things that you can do for yourself is figure out what you're really passionate about, and just learn about it. Like learn as much as you can about what you feel passionate about. And that's what I've done. I've been passionate about good mock-ups, good digital recreations of the orchestra, and because of that, I've gotten really good at it, and I've gotten kind of a reputation for being good at it. And I've done nothing really special. I've worked hard, but I've done nothing really special, maybe except for when I feel when I feel passionate about something, I learn about it like crazy. So that's my advice is like figure out what you feel passionate about, figure out what feels fun for you, and then just go after it like crazy.
Yeah, it's sort of like this old saying I heard. There were these monks that would talk about the best way to study something is to remove all distractions, get good sleep, and eat well, and
Totally.
just focus
Totally.
solely on that one thing.
That's a great idea. I'm going to do that exact same thing. At least I'm trying to right now.
It's pretty hard in today's society, but I think you can do specific
Yeah,
things to
no,
make
I
it a little
completely
easier.
agree. And that like falls towards, I mean, one of the big goals of my career is to be somebody working in and around the Hollywood scene, but also be a really healthy person. And that's a really difficult balance to have. Is like, people are like, "Hey, I want you to write 20 minutes of Apex Legends music by next Tuesday," and it's like I have to do that, and I also, I also have to try and be a healthy person who's not like actively a jerk towards my wife. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, and so that's a good balance. That's a good thing to want to have for sure.
If you could change one thing about starting your career, what would you
Oh,
change?
that is such a good question. Um, I I like to believe that things are for a reason, and therefore, like, oh, there's not a lot of stuff that I would change, but I think if there is like anything that I would change, I would be less scared. And I know that that sounds weird
Mm,
because it's like, well, fear is a feeling. You can't particularly control your feelings. But I think that, like, I would try my very best to change my mindset into like you can get where you're trying to go, with good hard work, and just, and like persistence. And that's what I've found is that, like, I've messaged certain composers, who I want to work with an embarrassing amount of times, and I just really and I've tried to be nice, so I haven't been like, answer me or I'll kill your family, like but it's more like, hey, I'm really interested in your work. I love what you're doing. I'd be so interested in working together at some point or something like that, and I've
I think more often than not, you'll receive a good response by asking that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, I'll be totally honest with you. More often than not, what you're going to receive in response is silence,
Mm,
and that's okay. I mean, if you're reaching out to Hans Zimmer, for example, there's probably a 1 in 1,000 chance that he's going to get back to you, and that's fine. He's a busy guy. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think that I was just so scared that my music was garbage or that people weren't gonna like
mm.
me. And if I could change anything, it actually wouldn't be anything specific about how I came up into the business, but it would be more that, I'd wanna have a little bit more confidence and just have that inner confidence that's like, it's like, "Yeah, you know what? Maybe what I made today is not the best thing I've ever heard ever, but if I keep working, I'm gonna get there." If I keep putting effort into my craft, I'm gonna figure this out. Um, and so, I think that I was in a lot of ways just so kind of dominated by things that I was scared of, and I think that I wish that I could change that. And I'm getting there in my career now where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be a little bit more led by confidence and hopefully humility too. But definitely kind of confidence that says, you know what, I can get where I'm trying to go. And it's okay if people don't like me. It's okay if somebody doesn't think that I wrote the best bit of music of all time or whatever it is. But just have that kind of inner confidence that, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do really well because I'm aiming to do really well, and kind of having faith in myself to be able to do that. That's probably what I would change.
If anything, at the end of the day, you're really doing this for yourself. So trying too hard not
Totally.
to focus on everyone else.
Well, and I'd actually even come at it just ever so slightly different, where I would say that, that I'm not doing this for myself. I mean, obviously, so there is a way. So let's look at this in two ways. One, it's what I'm doing is a little bit selfish because it's like I get to make music for a living. I get to like sit in front of my computer and dink around all day. Like that's super fun, and I'm not going to pretend like it isn't. Um,
Yeah.
but I also think that somebody who's ultimately going to succeed as a composer is somebody who realizes that what they do is ultimately for the enjoyment of someone else, right?
Mm.
And so what I write, if what I write is any good, it's only good because it's touched the people who have heard it. And so if I write something all day long that makes me happy but makes nobody else happy, then nobody's going to hire me. Nobody cares to hear that music. But
Yeah.
like John Williams, for example, there's a reason that his music touches millions of people. And I think that that's because he's writing with them in mind and not just himself. And so I want to go into this with a mindset of I'm writing for the joy of others. Like, I'm writing so that other people can hear and listen to and experience what I'm doing, and in response have feelings of joy because of that. And also, when I think like that, there's a bit of pressure that gets relieved off of me. Oh, I can have that inner confidence because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not about me being the absolute best composer who ever walked the earth and no one will ever top me. It's not about being that. It's about simple joy. It's about I want to write music that moves people. I want to write
Mm.
music that is for their good, if that makes sense, not just for my own.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely does. I think that's really eye-opening for me because I think since I've started making music, I've struggled with the balance between making music that I enjoy and making music that other people enjoy.
Yeah, that's a hard balance for sure. And I think it should definitely be both. I think that you shouldn't make things that you're like, I absolutely hate this, but like at the same time, I am really trying to think about the experience that other people are having when they're listening to my music.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's all about the balance.
Mhm. Mhm.
What is your creative process like?
Um, that it depends greatly on like how much time I'm given for a project. So for example, like last January, I wrote the lion's bulk of the material for Apex Legends season 16, and that was like a crazy mad rush. So it was like, Stephen Barton called me on a Monday, and he was like, I need two 7-minute suites of music from you, and I need them by next Tuesday. And so I had 8 days to write 14 minutes of music. And
Oh my gosh.
it was a lot, and so you can imagine that, like, if I've got 4 months to work on a feature-length film, then my process is going to be a lot different in that regard than if I have 14 minutes of music to do in 8 days. And
Yeah,
so what my process was for that is first I got to know my reference material really well, kind of what EA was looking for. Respawn is the company who does Apex Legends, and I got to know what is the production behind that kind of music, and what do I need to learn in order to do this? And that was like my first day, is almost like prepping. And so, I mean, that sounds crazy. It's like, what is the first thing you do? Well, I burn an entire day on research. But that's in line with almost everything that I do. Is the first step of my process is research, 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 in just getting to know the kind of music that I'm making. Um, and so,
what kind
go
of
ahead.
resources do you use when you research?
YouTube. Honestly, so much YouTube. YouTube and Google. And I mean, really, what my research is it's not like scholarly research where I'm looking up books, and it's really that my research is listening to music. And so, for example, this last Apex Legends thing that I did, it's like a reggaeton thing, which is like an e like a his what sorry like a Hispanic, like EDM kind of thing, rap, hip hop, that sort of thing. And so basically, I spent a day. I'd put it at like 4 to 8 hours, listening to that
Just
music.
listening?
Yeah, just listening to that kind of music and saying, okay, like what are the kick drums doing? Like, how do they um how are they compressing their kicks? How are they? And I'm just really listening to that kind of thing, and saying, like, what is the balance of the levels? What are the types of different instruments that are occupying the space? I look at it like this. It's like, if you're making a chocolate chip cookie, and somebody says to you, make the best chocolate chip cookie in the world. I'm probably going to go out and taste a few good chocolate chip cookies
Yeah,
first, right? And so, and I
because then you have something to base it off of.
exactly. And then I also know that if I'm putting because I've tasted a bunch of chocolate chip cookies, I know that if I'm putting cumin in my chocolate chip cookies, I'm probably doing something wrong. And So it's just a way for me to get to know what the ingredients are of whatever I'm making. Is it a John Williams thing? And therefore I'm using classic orchestration, and I'm using, like, diatonic melody, and I'm using, I'm writing modally, and I'm using chromatic medians for modulate, blah, 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 like all of this stuff, right? And so I'm listening to these kinds of music, and I'm saying, what exactly do I need in order to recreate this in a way that works? And so that is true of all of my processes, no matter how much time I have. But if I have enough time, so if it's not we need 14 minutes of music in 8 days kind of thing, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend the very first big bulk of my time, like, writing a main idea that I'm super passionate about. And that could be a melody, right? That could be I liken it to something like bum ba dum ba bum ba da, like something like Indiana Jones, where it's like John Williams starts out and he's got this main idea that he's doing. And I would liken it to that if I have time on a project, the very first thing that I'm jumping into a ton is just that first idea. Is it sound design, or is it a melody, or is it a particular chord progression? But I want something that I can get super passionate about and not get sick of if I'm about to spend a couple months working on it. And so, and if I'm not getting sick of it, then hopefully the audience isn't either. And so, yeah, that's what my process would look like: is a lot of research, a lot of work up front. And if I do that good work up front, then hopefully everything that follows that is just a lot of fun in actually completing that work.
Do you use any specific softwares while you listen to music to analyze it at
No,
all?
not really. I mean, when I use a project, when I use a specific piece of music for
Reference?
yeah, for like reference, then I might drop that piece of music directly into my DAW. I use Logic Pro, and so I might drop it directly into my DAW so that I can kind of like switch back and forth and listen to that reference very easily as I'm creating my piece of music. So if it's a John Williams thing, I can make my thing, and then I can listen to it real quick so that I can be like, oh, my trombones are way too muddy. I need to fix the voicings on those, or etc. Something like that. And so, but I mean, beyond that, it's YouTube, and I do Apple Music. So yeah, that's basically it for me. Nothing spectacular other than I just listen really closely and really intently.
Nice.
Yeah.
How do you go about transcribing music?
Um, I mean, really, not to sound like a broken record, but again, just like listening like crazy.
Do you write it down on sheet music, or do you often just do MIDI?
I often will just do MIDI. And that's just because I live in a very digital realm where everything that I write ultimately will end up going through the MIDI, because I need to get it approved by the producer of the film, or the director of the film, or
Mm,
the audio director of the game that I'm working on. And so when I complete a project, when I complete writing the music, it needs to sound like perfect already before I
yeah,
even record orchestra for it or anything. Because what you'll notice, I just recently got hired by an Oscar-winning composer, which I'm really, really, it's been really cool.
that's
And
awesome.
what he was telling me, and what he and I were discussing really, is that bad demos equals cues getting rejected, even when it's good music. And
Wow.
so basically, and that's not even particularly the director or the producer's fault or anything. They're just listening to the music and they're like, something sounds wrong. And then they start trying to fix it, even though they have no idea what to do to fix it. And
Yeah,
so when you make a mock-up, when you make a demo of music that sounds really good, and then you're able to send that to the producer, then basically you can get cues approved very easily, because it already sounds basically like it's going to sound after the orchestra is recorded. And that's why you make a really great sounding mock-up, is to ease the process for everybody. And so, yeah, when I'm transcribing, what I will do is I will just kind of turn on my bat ears, and I will listen to a couple seconds of the music, and I'll be like, all right, the horns are playing like a split major chord. Like it would be like a first, a fifth, and a tenth. Like C G E. And I'm like, okay, the horns and the trombones maybe are doing that. And then I'm listening into the violins, and the violins are going taka 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 taka. Okay, I've got that. Um, and I mean, I just try and zone in and just hone my ability to listen incredibly closely. And that it's a fun challenge. It's hard to do. But it's really fun when you can kind of get into it, and you can hear things in music that maybe nobody else is really hearing except for you, because you're just like, basically just a nerd who's who's just listening really, really closely to everything.
That's how I feel whenever I listen to my favorite music.
Oh, totally. Yeah, you're like telling everybody, "Oh, did you hear that? Did you hear that? Did you hear that?" And they're
Yeah.
like, "No, no, I really didn't."
When you transcribe, do you focus on individual instruments?
That's a good question. I think I focus on, just like I do when I compose, I focus on sections. Generally speaking, two violins in your first violin section are not doing different things. Um, and also, generally speaking, and this is a big generality, your first violins and your second violins aren't doing something that's massively different from each other. And so, what I tend to think of writing for orchestra as, and this goes for my listening process as well, is basically each section of the orchestra is like one instrument. So the strings would be like, would be like your keys in a rock band, right? Your brass would be like a chugging electric guitar in the rock band. Um, and there's a lot of different ways to think of this. Your woodwinds might be your synth that you've got. Um, and so now, is that a perfect analogy? No, it's not. But I like to think of the different sections of the orchestra each as one instrument, and I like to write for them like that. So if I want really big chords, then the brass is going to get the really big chords, while my strings are doing the melody or something like that. Like a singer would do the melody, and the keys would do chords behind the singer. And what I generally find is, when I'm transcribing, for the most part, this again, it's a generality. It's a generalization, I think I should say. But when I'm listening and transcribing, things tend to follow those rules. Is they tend to follow the rules of a specific, section of the orchestra is going to be doing a particular job. So what I do when I'm transcribing is I just listen for what are the jobs that I hear being done, and maybe one of them is being done by a synth or a drum kit or something like that. But I kind of listen to what are the ingredients here, and then I listen for what is the instrument that is accomplishing that. Or if it's a synth, then what kind of sound is that synth making in order to accomplish that task. And that's kind of my thought process with transcribing.
What are your favorite YouTube channels to learn about
Um,
transcribing techniques?
Transcribing, I don't know. That was kind of more just something that I picked up. But my favorite composing YouTube channels are Ashton Gleckman. He's great. Anne Catherine Dern. She's great. Daniel Beigebaum. He does some really phenomenal mock-ups. The way that I mock up my brass is a very much kind of like his style, which is very good. And Blake Robinson. Um, and he has probably the best mock-up I've ever heard, which is a Star Wars piece. The main theme of Star Wars. So yeah, if you're interested in composing in general, but also Ashton Gleckman does a ton of transcription stuff, so definitely watch his channel for that. But if you're interested in learning about composing at all, those four channels are a great place to start.
I think it's brilliant just how many resources there are online for completely no price at all.
Absolutely. Honestly, I've probably done the equivalent of a PhD just in watching YouTube.
Would you ever collaborate with anyone on a project?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think I think I there's a lot of reasons to collaborate. One reason to collaborate in kind of like the video game or TV movie scene is just because there's so much work to do. So I mean, there's definitely times where I've been hired on projects to write a bunch of additional music. So that's one way of collaborating, where somebody gives me credit, but it's not the main composer credit in order to write a couple of minutes of music or 20 minutes of music or whatever for a particular project. Um, and I would do. I mean, I'll do the same thing when I'm in the position of like doing big movies and stuff. I want to make sure that I'm always doing that in a way that is fair to the people who are working with me and collaborating with me, who might not have the lead composer credit. Um, but at the same time, I think it's a great way to give new and upcoming composers a chance. And then the second way of collaborating is just for fun, because you've stumbled across somebody who's like, oh wow, they're really good, and I'd love to write something with them. And absolutely, I'd be up for that as well. I think I probably have a list of 5 or 10 composers just in my head who I'm like, ooh, they'd be really fun to write something with at some point. Um, and so, yeah, I think the answer is absolutely yes. That sounds fun.
What do you think your reaction would be if you could collaborate with Hans Zimmer or John Williams?
I think complete and utter terror would probably be my first my first reaction. Just a bit of a panic attack. But I think after that panic subsided, I think I would just, like I was talking to you about earlier, is like lean into that confidence of just like, you know what, like if we just think about the story that we're telling, what the audience is going to hear, how they're going to enjoy it, it's going to go just fine. And yeah, I mean, honestly, if I were to collaborate with Hans Zimmer or John Williams, then I would bring whatever I could to the table, which is I really care that the audience has a great time while listening to the music, and I can have that kind of attitude coming into it, and I'm not completely unknowledgeable about lots of different parts of composing, so I would bring in whatever I could in that regard, and then I would also just ask them so many questions that it would just annoy the pants off of them, and just yeah, just learn everything that I could possibly learn. And I think I've been treating my composing like a practice, like I just, no matter what I'm doing, I'm always practicing and I'm always learning. So I would try and approach it like that. God only knows if they'd appreciate that I approached it like that, but but that's how I always tend to approach it. Is like there's just another opportunity to learn something cool.
It's kind of like being a sponge. You kind of just absorb all this
Totally. And I,
knowledge.
I think, this is just a personal pet peeve of mine, but I think people always say, and there's probably truth to it for sure, but they always say like, oh, when you're a child, you just soak things up and you learn, and then when you become an adult, you don't learn nearly as well anymore. And I personally think that that's ridiculous. I think that like there's just an open-mindedness that comes with learning about the world, and I don't think we get any worse at learning when we grow up. I think that we get more closed-minded. I think that we kind of close ourselves off to learning about different things. And if you're an orchestra guy, you close yourself off to learning about synths. And if you're a synth guy, you close yourself off to learning about the orchestra. And you know what? It's all good. It's all really, really good stuff. And so I just want to have that mindset that that's like you can be a sponge until you're 904 if you get the opportunity to live that long. And yeah, and I'm not going to let anybody tell me different.
It's like we have this deep-rooted fear of facing new
Yes.
things that it stops us from
Oh my gosh,
creating
yes, you
entirely.
are 100% right. And I think about that so often, that like learning a new thing is hard just because we tend to be scared. not because we're any worse at learning a new thing. And it's just when you're a child, you have to learn new things in order to survive. You have to learn language. You have to learn, you have to learn what they're teaching you in school, to at least to a certain degree. You have to learn to get along with other people. You have to learn to exist in the same space with your parents. So of course you're going to be a sponge because you're doing it kind of to survive. But now it's like, can you just keep yourself open like that? And can you kind of have enough, I don't know, for lack of a better word, enough wisdom to just be like, to say, I'm scared, but I don't have to be scared because learning new things is really cool. So, like, let's not be scared of things like AI. Let's not be scared of the business changing. Let's not be scared of things. Let's not be scared of things that we have no reason to be scared of. Let's just be curious and open-minded and learn as much as we can. That's kind of, so anyway, I love how you said that because I think that that's perfect.
Whenever I feel like I'm giving up on something, I sort of just remind myself why I'm doing this and why it'll change my life for better. Do you do that?
I really like that. Do I do that? I think that, well, I almost have a couple answers. I think my first answer is that um, what what I do, somebody might call me and they might say, "Hey Blair, I need X amount of minutes of music by next Friday," and I really don't have time to second guess myself. John Williams super wisely said once that that being a composer for film is a lot more like being a journalist than being a novelist. A novelist, you can work for 5 years on a novel, and as long as it's good at the end of it, then nobody cares how long you worked on it, right? You have your time to get it done. But when you're a journalist, your boss says, "Hey, I need 500 words by tomorrow on whatever the president just did," or something like that. And it's just no questions asked. You just have to write it. You don't have room for fear.
The first thing that popped in my mind was J. Jonah Jameson like yelling at Peter Parker.
Yes. That's exactly it, right? It's like there's no choice there. You just do it because you have to do it or else you get fired. And so yes, there is an element to that. But then um I only spend, I'd say, I only spend probably less than half of my overall time doing things that I'm technically getting paid for. So the other half of my time, so the other 175 days a year or so, um, I'm kind of figuring out and I'm playing by ear, like what do I do? And I don't know if I remind myself so much that it's gonna, like make me better, but I think what I try and do is I try and really work graciously with myself and help myself get there without putting a lot of pressure on myself that I need to perform. Like perform, perform, perform. You just have to be perfect. You have to, and I try not to do that. But instead, if I feel like I need rest, I try and take a rest. If I feel like I want to watch Mythbusters for an hour, I watch Mythbusters for an hour. And it's like, and so I actually try, and not to say that there's anything wrong with what you're doing whatsoever, but I actually try and avoid like kicking myself into gear. There, like I heard once that like there are two methods of like getting a wild horse to do what you want, and one of those methods is called breaking a horse, and then the other method is called gentling a horse. And basically, the difference in those two techniques is about as obvious as the two names. Is breaking a horse is like literally almost like abusing it till it does what you want it to do. And keep in
Yeah.
mind, I don't know anything about raising horses. So if you know something about this and I'm totally wrong, then I apologize. But I still think the metaphor is good. Um, yeah, and so basically, it's like, but for gentling a horse, it's like working with it, and I like to think of working with myself and working with others with that gentling mindset set of I'm not trying to force myself into doing things. Rather, I'm trying to. I mean, this may sound like really dumb and kind of cliche, but it's kind of like flow with the river. You know what I mean? And like find where that path is of least resistance, that I'm going to do the best work that I possibly can. but I'm not like just mega stressing myself out the entire time, trying to force myself into it. You know what I mean?
I don't know if this is a fair comparison, but it's kind of like when you criticize someone, if you do it in a harsher tone, you're more likely to not get a positive
Dude,
feedback from them
100%.
rather than with a
Yes,
positive tone.
absolutely. Is like if and I think that most people kind of understand that rule, at least on a sort of base sense. But I think most people don't understand that it probably works the same with yourself. Is that when I talk to
Yeah,
myself with a really harsh critical attitude, I actually don't perform as well for myself as I could. But when I speak to myself with respect, and when I speak to myself gently, and give stock to what I'm feeling, as opposed to telling myself that I'm stupid for feeling the way that I feel or something like that. Um, I actually, I mean, surprisingly enough, do a lot better. you know, so it's kind of like it's sort of the golden rule in reverse. Like treat others how you want to be treated. I would treat yourself how you want others to treat you. You know, and I think that most of the time we try and maybe treat, I mean, and maybe not everybody, but we try and treat other people well, and then we just take giant craps on ourselves,
yeah.
where we
It's like this weird, distorted way of thinking that everyone struggles with.
absolutely, yeah, totally.
Do you have any upcoming projects?
Yeah, at the moment, right now I don't feel super comfortable saying
Yeah, no
who
worries.
it is, just because I don't want to jinx it. But like I said, like I just got a gig with an Oscar-winning composer. Um, and I'm going to be writing additional music with him, as well as I'm going to be rebuilding his entire like
Oh, wow.
computer system for his template. Yeah, so that he can have really phenomenal sounding mock-ups. So like we were talking about earlier, to make sure that when he submits cues, that they get accepted the first time, because they sound great. So I'm doing that with him, and I'm super excited about that, as well as I've got a couple things that I'm really excited about that are kind of in the fire at the moment, irons in the fire. Just because I just went to LA and I had a bunch of phenomenal meetings down there, and so yeah, I nothing. Unfortunately, I wish I could tell you everything, but nothing that I can say at the moment. But I will say, for the Multiversus stuff, um, we are going to go to Nashville pretty soon, and we're going to record a bunch of orchestra for that in the next, I don't know, couple of
That's
months or
incredible.
whatever. And so yeah,
Wow.
that'll be super super fun. So I'm really excited for that one.
Well, it sounds like you're gonna be really productive coming up soon.
I'm hoping so, man. The hardest part of composing is not composing; it's getting the work. So yeah, hopefully things stay real busy, because I like it that way.
What should someone start working on right now if they want to become a composer in the industry?
It depends on what spot that they are in their career, but let's assume. I mean, for um, sake of argument, let's assume that it's somebody like you who's around like 18 years old, right? And
Yep.
has interest in doing this, but you haven't like done any big projects or anything. The advice that I give to you is probably to just be super open-minded. For one, there's lots of ways to make it in music, to follow the things that you're passionate about. And then, once you're kind of honing in at least a little bit, I don't want to trip people up on themselves, because it's like telling somebody to pick a major when they're 14. You're not ready to think about that just yet. So it's like, if I'm like, figure out what you're passionate about, and then do that, do that, do that. It's like, I mean, you might just be like, well, I'm trying to figure out what I'm gonna get for lunch tomorrow. And so, like, I don't want to push it too hard, but I will say, as you begin to get a feel for what you are passionate about, the best advice I have is to get so good at that you just simply cannot be ignored. That you are just so
Mm.
good at what you do that people cannot look at you without saying, "Damn." that is a talented dude. And so, that's what I'd say is like, as you start to figure out those things that you're passionate about, practice, 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 and try and practice in ways that are fun and enjoyable for yourself. But that is, like I said, I've had some luck in my career, and I have to admit that. But the things that have happened in my career because of me have happened because I've had that attitude where it's like, man, I just want to get so good that people are like, dang boy, what are you doing? And I want to do that. And I think that's probably the best thing that anybody can do is whatever you want to do in your life, just put 110% into it and do the best that you possibly can.
Well, to me, it looks like I think you're getting pretty close to getting there.
I'm getting closer, man.
I've heard some great things from you.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Okay. I think that's gonna end it.
Right.
So, thank you so much for joining me. I
Yeah.
really appreciated our talk. I learned a ton of new things, and I'm very grateful.
Yeah, man.
You were
Absolutely.
a great guest to have on.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. You've been a great host.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've been working on my conversation skills a bit.
Yeah, dude, honestly. It's hard. I mean, all this stuff is such a I've had to work on my conversational abilities as well. It can be really hard to have conversation in ways that feel natural and fun
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it good job practicing. This is a great way to practice for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate it a lot, man. Thank you.
absolutely. You have a good one, okay?
You too.
All right.